Johnny Valentine wasn't just the father of Greg Don't Call Me Entertaining Valentine. He was a mean, granite-jawed locker room dinosaur who walked into every territory like he'd just been paroled from Attica with a grudge against everyone who didn't wrestle like they owed him money. Valentine was from that generation of guys who thought the word kayfabe meant, you better not smile or I'll knock your teeth out. He believed wrestling should look real because, in his head, it was real. And if you weren't on board, you were getting potatoed into next week. He was all shoot, no sell. Guys dreaded working with him not just because he was stiff, they dreaded the hospital bill afterward. He once said, I can't make you believe wrestling's real, but I can make you believe I'm real. That wasn't a quote, that was a threat. Here's what we know. He despised comedy wrestling. You were either dying in the ring or wasting his time. He had friction with high flyers and gimmick guys. Too fake, too flashy, not enough broken ribs. He was notoriously hard to get along with in the back. Arrogant, intense, and not above jawing with promoters if they booked him weak. He once supposedly beat the hell out of a guy backstage for calling it just entertainment. Let's dive into some of the shoot heat he had with some of the guys he worked with, starting at number 5, the Chic, Ed Farett. In July 1973, Detroit's Cobo Arena looked less like a wrestling venue and more like the scene of a sanctioned mugging. Valentine and the Chic stepped into a stretcher death match that did exactly what it said on the label. Every time Valentine got strapped onto the gurney, he tore himself off like Michael Myers in boots and elbowed the Chic's gimmick straight into the 1950s. After 3 stretcher escapes and 1 final mauling, Johnny took the US title and left the Chic twitching in a pool of his own gimmick. This feud had nothing to do with storylines and everything to do with hatred. Johnny Valentine didn't respect fireballs, swords, or foreign menace gimmicks. He saw the Chic's act, throwing fire, stabbing dudes with pencils, praying mid-match, and decided this wasn't wrestling, it was a circus. And Valentine didn't do circuses, he did trauma. Behind the scenes, there was no bonding, no laughs. The Chic barely spoke English in promos, and Valentine barely tolerated phoniness. They were opposites. One a theatrical sadist, the other a cold-blooded technician who worked like he was getting paid per broken bone. Greg Valentine once said his dad believed, you can't make him think wrestling's real, but you can make him think you're real. And that night in Detroit, nobody thought Johnny was playing. The stretcher wasn't a prop, it was a forecast. Johnny Valentine didn't just put a bounty on Tim Woods in the ring, he had zero respect for him backstage. That clean-cut, all-American handshake before the match stuff, Johnny thought it was weak, too polite, too boring, too safe. Woods was a pro, but in Valentine's eyes, he wrestled like he was trying to get out of the match alive, not go to war. And Johnny didn't trust anyone who wasn't willing to lose teeth. The heat was personal, and it was quiet, the most dangerous kind. No yelling in locker rooms, no table flipping, just Valentine refusing to shake his hand, giving him nothing in promos, walking past him like he wasn't there. And then once the bell rang, turning the volume to 11 and hitting Woods way harder than anyone else on the card that night. Backstage sources say it came to blows off camera. Johnny dropped him in a hallway with a sucker elbow that busted out 2 of Woods' teeth. Not for the crowd, not for a payday, just because he wanted him to feel it. Woods never complained, but he never got close either. This was the kind of quiet, stiff, real-life tension that never gets patched up. Even Ric Flair once admitted Johnny didn't like the amateur-type boys. He didn't trust them, he didn't respect them, and Woods was the poster child. When the plane went down in October '75 and Johnny's career ended, Woods publicly wished him well. Privately, no one knows, but you can bet Johnny took the hate with him all the way to the hospital bed. April 18th, 1975, St. Louis, Kiel Auditorium. Johnny Valentine faced Harley Race in a 2 out of 3 falls match for the Missouri state title. What was supposed to be a classic wrestling showcase turned into a near riot that scorched the city's sacred wrestling turf. The finish? Botched on purpose. Harley won with Valentine's leg clearly under the ropes, and fans absolutely lost their minds. People threw glass, chairs, trash. One announcer had to be pulled out of the ring bleeding. Security couldn't contain the crowd. A riot broke out so fast the referee sprinted out of the building. Some say it was the most violent crowd reaction St. Louis had ever seen. Here's where the real heat sits. Valentine was furious the finish made him look weak. Sam Muchnick, the St. Louis Godfather, booked the rope finish to protect both guys, but Valentine didn't care about protected. He cared about respected. Word is, he stormed into the back, demanding to know who screwed it up and if Race had gone into business for himself. Race didn't. He didn't have to. The finish made Valentine look like a guy who needed excuses, and Johnny hated excuses. The tension between them boiled for weeks. They respected each other's toughness, but they didn't click. Valentine worked slow and mean. Race worked snug and proud. And in Valentine's eyes, Race played too much backstage politics. He never forgot that St. Louis chose Harley as a made man and made Johnny look like the guy fans could throw bottles at. They didn't feud again after that. Not really. Valentine finished out the year, stiffing everyone in the Carolinas. Race went back to being Harley, a guy who played ball with promoters. But that night in St. Louis, that was personal, and Valentine took it as a message, loud and bloody. This one wasn't a feud. It wasn't a storyline. It was a straight-up backstage assault disguised as a wrestling match, and Joe Pazendak didn't see it coming until his jaw hit the mat. Greg Valentine told the story years later like it was just family folklore. Johnny was in the ring with Joe Pazendak, an old-school Minnesota veteran who'd worked everywhere, and snapped. No warning, no angle, no setup. Just cracked the guy across the face and broke his jaw clean in one shot. Not a stiff work punch, a shoot, a real one. Nobody knows exactly what set Johnny off. Some say Pazendak wasn't selling enough. Others say he tried to call spots with Johnny. And Johnny didn't take too kindly to being directed by a guy he didn't respect. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. A hospital trip and a very short conversation with the promoter afterward. Johnny didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just walked to the back like he'd finished a job and went on to the next town. That was Johnny's whole deal. If you didn't wrestle the way he thought wrestling should be wrestled, you were one mistake away from catching a real elbow in the face. And Pazendak caught it at full speed. That was how Valentine handled disrespect. Quiet, surgical, and so stiff it could knock out molars. This wasn't Brett Vince tension or some heated war of words. This was a guy deciding mid-match that he didn't like your face and doing something about it before intermission. There was no rematch, no receipts. Just one man's jaw wired shut, and another's reputation growing like a shadow in every locker room he entered. Ron Fuller never minced words about it. His brother Robert was flat out terrified of Johnny Valentine. Not he didn't want to wrestle him, not they had a stiff match once. No. Robert Fuller was genuinely afraid to be in the same locker room, let alone the same ring. And if you ever saw Johnny work up close, you get it. Ron and Dutch Mantell both told it straight on shoot interviews. Robert was young, cocky, and still figuring things out in the Southern Territories when Valentine showed up like a wrecking ball with a bad attitude. There was no storyline, no setup. Just Johnny glaring at Robert like he was a mosquito on a stake. Robert didn't want to wrestle him, didn't want to talk to him, and definitely didn't want to take that elbow drop that felt like it was sent by Satan. This wasn't just stiff work, it was psychological warfare. Valentine never raised his voice, never talked trash. He just looked through you like you weren't even on the card. That kind of silent, seething intensity rattled a lot of guys, but it broke Robert Fuller. According to Ron, Robert would check booking sheets twice just to make sure Johnny wasn't around. When he was, Robert got sick or needed to drive his girlfriend home. The excuses came fast. The exits came faster. The heat wasn't mutual. It was one-sided fear. Johnny didn't hate Robert. He just didn't care he existed. And to a guy like Robert, that indifference hit harder than a punch. You weren't even worth a beatdown. You were just someone to ignore, unless you got in the ring. Then you were a training dummy who owed him realism and a bruise. Some wrestlers were drawn to Johnny Valentine. Robert Fuller prayed for distance. Johnny Valentine didn't leave behind a legacy. He left behind scar tissue, emergency room invoices, and locker rooms full of men who never quite healed right. He wasn't a legend because of belts. He was a legend because you felt him, whether you wanted to or not. One guy had fireballs. Valentine had elbows. One lit gimmicks. Valentine lit riots. Another tried to keep it clean, got his teeth scattered like poker chips. One caused a finish to go sideways, and the city nearly tore the seats out in protest. Another didn't make it to intermission, jaw broken, match over, no receipts. And one guy didn't even need to be touched. Just being booked near Valentine had him calling in sick. Valentine wasn't there to shake hands or swap gear bags. He was there to convince you, one bone at a time. No acting, no glitter, no wink to the crowd. Just a man who worked so stiff his own kid couldn't tell if it was a match or an assault charge. He didn't crack jokes, he didn't play nice. And if your name showed up next to his, you had two choices: get real or get steamrolled. Everyone in this video learned that, not from watching tapes, but from wearing the bruises. Because in a business built on illusion, Valentine made damn sure he was the part that was real. If you've ever flinched just hearing Valentine's name, hit like. If you respect a guy who made the locker room colder just by walking into it, hit subscribe. This channel isn't about fairy tales, it's about the shoot, and the ones who lived it out loud, one elbow at a time. Thanks for watching.